Morgan Blake. Entry number 005. The Cursed Painting. Art has always been a window into the soul, a way to capture the essence of a moment, a person, a feeling. But some art captures more than it should. It was a stormy evening when I received the call that would change my life. My old friend, a curator at a prestigious gallery, sounded unusually tense as he spoke. He had come across a painting, one thought lost for decades, and he needed my help to authenticate it. The painting was rumored to be cursed. Every person who had owned it had met a gruesome fate, and the painting had always disappeared shortly after their death, only to reappear years later in a different part of the world. Despite my better judgment, I agreed to take on the task. The moment I said yes, a chill ran down my spine, as if the universe itself was warning me to stay away. The next morning, I made my way to the gallery. The city was still shrouded in the remnants of the night storm, the sky heavy with dark clouds. The gallery was an imposing building, its tall windows casting eerie reflections in the puddles that lined the street. Inside, the curator met me with a nervous smile and led me to a small room at the back of the gallery. There it was, the painting. It was more haunting than I could have imagined. The portrait depicted a woman with long, flowing hair, her eyes dark and piercing. The background was a swirl of deep reds and blacks, giving the impression of fire and shadow. But it was her eyes that held me captive. They were so lifelike, so full of emotion, fear, sadness, and something else, something darker. I felt as if those eyes were staring straight into my soul, pleading with me, warning me. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with a presence I couldn't quite explain. The curator handed me the painting's file, his hands trembling slightly. It contained the painting's history, a list of its previous owners and the gruesome circumstances of their deaths. I tried to focus on the task at hand, examining the painting, checking for signs of forgery, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows in the room seemed to move whenever I looked away, and the air felt cold, almost oppressive. That evening, I returned home with the file, intending to do more research. But as I sat down at my desk, the unease from earlier in the day returned with a vengeance. My apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt cold and unwelcoming. The shadows seemed darker, and the faintest sound made my heart race. I tried to concentrate on the file, but my mind kept drifting back to the painting. Those eyes, so full of despair, haunted me. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it brought nightmares, terrifying visions of the woman in the painting, her eyes staring at me as flames consumed her. I woke up in a cold sweat, the sound of her screams echoing in my ears. The next morning, I knew I had to delve deeper into the painting's history. Who was the woman in the painting? And what had happened to those who owned it? I started by researching Victor Grayson, the artist behind the painting. Grayson was a reclusive figure, known for his dark, moody works. But this painting was different. It was said to be his masterpiece, the last painting he created before he disappeared. I discovered that the woman in the painting was believed to be Grayson's wife, who had also vanished around the same time. The locals whispered about their troubled relationship, about Grayson's obsession with the occult, and his belief that he could achieve immortality through his art. As I dug deeper, I found references to a series of strange rituals that Grayson was said to have performed in his studio. Some claimed that he had made a pact with a malevolent entity, offering his wife's soul in exchange for eternal life. There was no concrete evidence, just stories passed down through the years, but the pieces began to fit together in a disturbing way. What was undeniable was the pattern of tragedy that followed the painting. Each of its owners had met a violent end, their deaths shrouded in mystery and fear. One owner had been found in his study, his body contorted in agony, with no visible cause of death. Another had been discovered drowned in a river, though there were no signs of a struggle or how he got there. The most recent owner had fallen from a great height, his body shattered on the rocks below, yet there were no tall buildings or cliffs nearby. The painting had vanished after each death, only to reappear years later, always with a new owner who was doomed to suffer the same fate. The deaths were different, but the fear and horror that surrounded them were the same. And now, the painting had found its way to me. As I read through the accounts, a sense of dread settled over me. It was as if the painting was a living entity, feeding off the fear and suffering of those who came into contact with it. The more I learned, the more I felt that the painting was watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. That night, the nightmares returned with a vengeance. I dreamed of the woman in the painting, her eyes filled with terror as flames surrounded her. She reached out to me, her hands covered in blood, her screams piercing the air. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The fear was real, and it clung to me like a shadow, refusing to let go. Over the next few days, the painting's influence on me grew stronger. I found myself unable to stay away from it, spending hours staring at the woman's eyes, trying to decipher the emotions they held. The more I looked, the more I felt that those eyes were alive, watching me, judging me. The whispers that had started as faint, almost imperceptible sounds now grew louder, more insistent. At first, I could barely make out the words, but soon they became clear. They spoke of pain, of suffering, of death. They told me that I was next, that the painting would claim me just as it had claimed all the others. I began to see things that I knew couldn't be real. Shadowy figures moved at the edge of my vision, disappearing as soon as I turned to look at them. The air in my apartment grew colder, and I could feel a constant pressure on my chest, as if something was trying to crush the life out of me. I knew I was losing my grip on reality, but I couldn't stop. I was obsessed with the painting, convinced that it held some dark secret that I needed to uncover. My health began to deteriorate, I lost weight, my skin grew pale, and I became increasingly paranoid. I stopped sleeping, afraid of the nightmares that waited for me every time I closed my eyes. The whispers followed me everywhere, even invading my dreams. In one particularly vivid nightmare, I found myself trapped in a dark, twisted version of my apartment. The walls were covered in blood, and the woman from the painting stood over me, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the walls, and I felt a cold hand close around my throat, choking the life out of me. I woke up gasping for air, the sensation of that cold hand still lingering on my skin. I knew then that I had to do something before the painting consumed me entirely. But what could I do? Destroying it seemed impossible. The painting was too powerful, too malevolent. And yet, I knew that if I didn't act soon, I would end up like all the others. Desperation drove me to uncover more about Victor Grayson and his connection to the painting. I found myself traveling to the coastal town where Grayson had lived, hoping to find some clue that could help me break the curse. The town was small, almost forgotten by time, with narrow, winding streets and buildings that seemed to lean in on each other. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and yet, there was an air of secrecy that hung over the town like a dark cloud. I sought out the local historian, an elderly man named Mr. Whitlock, who had lived in the town all his life. He was reluctant to talk at first, but as I pressed him, he began to reveal what he knew about Grayson. According to Mr. Whitlock, Grayson had been a man obsessed with death and the afterlife. He had spent years studying ancient texts, searching for a way to cheat death and achieve immortality. His wife, Eleanor, had been his muse, the subject of many of his paintings. But their relationship had grown strained as Grayson delved deeper into the occult. Eleanor had become withdrawn, and there were rumors that she had tried to leave Grayson, but he wouldn't let her go. Some said that Grayson had performed a dark ritual, trapping Eleanor's soul in the painting, hoping to preserve her beauty and his connection to her forever. But the ritual had gone horribly wrong. Instead of preserving Eleanor's soul, Grayson had created a monster, a painting that was a doorway to a dark and twisted realm, where the souls of the dead were trapped, unable to move on. And now, the painting was hungry for more souls. Mr. Whitlock warned me to leave the town and never look back, but I couldn't. I was too deeply entwined in the painting's curse, too obsessed with finding a way to end it. I thanked him for his help and returned to the gallery, more determined than ever to destroy the painting. I knew I couldn't simply destroy the painting with brute force. It was too powerful, too malevolent. I needed to find a way to break the curse that bound it, to release the souls trapped within and end the painting's reign of terror once and for all. I spent days researching ancient rituals, looking for anything that could help me. I found references to a ritual of cleansing, one that could sever the ties between the physical and spiritual realms. But it required a great sacrifice, something I wasn't sure I was willing to give. As I prepared for the ritual, the painting's influence grew stronger. The whispers became deafening, the shadowy figures more aggressive. I could feel the painting's malevolent presence pressing down on me, trying to break my will. The night of the ritual, I was ready. I had gathered all the necessary materials and prepared the space. The painting sat in the center of the room, its eyes watching me, daring me to try and destroy it. As I began the ritual, the room grew cold, and the lights flickered. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to come alive, writhing and twisting as if in agony. The whispers reached a crescendo, filling my mind with thoughts of death and despair. But I pushed through, reciting the ancient incantations, pouring every ounce of my will into breaking the curse. The painting fought back with everything it had. Objects flew across the room, the air crackled with energy, and the shadows began to close in on me. I could feel the painting's power lashing out at me, trying to stop the ritual, but I pressed on. My voice grew stronger, the words flowing from me with a power I didn't know I had. I could feel the bonds between the painting and the souls it held weakening, the curse starting to unravel. Finally, with one last burst of energy, I completed the ritual. The painting let out a terrible, ear-piercing scream, the sound of 1,000 souls crying out in agony. The room was filled with a blinding light, and I felt a force like a tidal wave wash over me, knocking me to the ground. When I opened my eyes, the painting was gone. The room was silent, the shadows gone, the whispers silenced. I had done it. I had broken the curse. But the victory came at a great cost. The painting was gone, but I was left broken, both physically and mentally. My body ached with the toll the ritual had taken on me, and my mind was filled with the memories of the horrors I had faced. I tried to return to my normal life, but the darkness that had touched me lingered. The nightmares continued, less frequent but still terrifying. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something had followed me back from the other side. I became a recluse, avoiding people, afraid that the curse might still be lingering in some way. I destroyed all the research I had done, burned every note, every book. I wanted no trace of that cursed painting to remain. But deep down, I knew that the darkness wasn't completely gone. It had left its mark on me, a stain on my soul that I could never fully erase. And as I sat alone in my darkened apartment, I realized that I was forever changed. The painting was destroyed, the curse broken, but the horror of what I had experienced would stay with me for the rest of my life. And I couldn't help but wonder, what if there were other cursed objects out there, waiting for someone like me to find them? I wasn't sure I wanted to find out, but something told me that my encounters with the supernatural were far from over. Morgan Blake. End of entry.